Hey, Keep the Changers. We are so glad that you guys are with us today. That came on to me quick, so let me start all over. Editors, cut that out. Hey, all you Keep the Changers, we're so glad that you're here with us this week. This is, as I always say, a very special week. Becky is a friend of mine that I've been trying to get on this podcast for probably about 2 years. She's someone I so admire as a leader with the Maxwell leadership team and the work that she does with private coaching clients in corporate America. And I'm going to let her talk all about that as the CEO of founder of Leaders Empowered. And so I'm going to tell you all about that as the CEO and founder of Leaders Empowered. And it's a premier leadership development consulting firm. And she's going to tell us all about that. But all you JMTers, MLTers that are listening to this, you're going to be so excited to hear Miss Becky Spieth. Becky, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Bart. I'm so excited to be here today.
I have seen you on stage since I came to the Maxwell leadership team in 2013. I've seen you in how you interact with other people. I've seen you in your leadership, which is so powerful. And I really believe that whether people are familiar with Maxwell leadership or they're in business themselves or they just enjoy hanging out with us on the Keep the Change podcast, that they need to hear your story. So, Becky, tell us about what's going on in your world and the impact that you're making today.
Well, my business and my life have evolved so much. I feel like I've lived 7 lives already. But I love the place I'm in right now. And I'm so expectant on what God's going to be doing in my life next. I just really have this sense like my very best days are ahead of me and the greatest impact is ahead of me. And even though I've had, a lot of really awesome success, and I just feel so fortunate to be able to serve, especially the Maxwell leadership coaches, because I feel like they're the leaders of leaders, and it's like that ripple effect. And so helping them build successful businesses by being a part of the faculty on the team, it gets me so excited to help people build a strong and profitable business. But then I also love working with multi-generational leadership teams in different sectors. I get bored easy. And I found a long time ago when I first started with the team that the best way to build this business was to say yes to all the opportunities that kept coming before me. And so, I've been able to work in all kinds of different industries and with different types of clients, from like a solopreneur or someone that was just in transition all the way up to like Fortune 100 and Fortune 50 companies. So right now I'm just waiting expectantly on God to see like what is next. And in the meantime, I'm going to continue serving how I'm serving right now.
That is so good. And, I was telling you before we started, I kind of give you a little prompt. I said, I'm going to ask you this and then ask you this, but it's going to be organic. So we're going organic. The reason is because a couple of times you mentioned following God's lead. And I know faith has been a huge part of your path, and being obedient to the cause is a huge part of your path. Becky, tell us about that, because again, as a leader in industry, a leadership coach, a woman that's made a huge mark in everything you've done, I think people need to hear how faith has been such an encourager and a guiding light for you as you've done your career.
Yeah. Faith is very important to me. I came to know Jesus as my Lord and Savior on Good Friday in my first grade class with Mrs. Hill when she was doing a flannel graph. So that's going to really date me. And I just couldn't believe that somebody could love me that much to lay down their life completely. And it just broke my heart. And I've tried to follow the Lord ever since. I did have a couple of years, I'll be honest with you, towards the end of high school that I was a little walking away, not as close to the Lord as I should have been. But I've always been a leader. I can remember even in like second and third grade being called up to the front of the church and doing like ventriloquism and doing different things and leading children's church at such a young age. And I didn't know a different way. God just put seeds of leadership inside of me, and I've just been able to follow along those paths and be, a student leader, and then just do some really amazing things that no one had ever been asked to do. Um, I was actually a state officer for Future Homemakers of America, and they asked me to be a state officer for Future Farmers of America because I grew up on a farm as well, and just do some different activities that I think laid the groundwork for me. But when I got married to my high school sweetheart and started having a family, I wanted to be able to stay home with them. And I had a very successful career as the artistic director for the first day spa in Michigan. Actually, at the age of 23, was Woman of the Year, and for the city of Ann Arbor. And
Wow.
I know that all of that, I'm saying all this to not like impress, but to impress upon you that it all went back to staying close to the Lord and listening to the prompting of the Holy Spirit. And when I was, staying home, I decided to homeschool our kids, and had three very close together. And right after I had my third, my daughter, my oldest son went nonverbal autistic. He had a real high fever, and it was a really trying time for us because we didn't understand like what to do. And back then, the option was to institutionalize him, and that just wasn't going to be an option for us. We just said no, and we started really living into hope. And I think without faith, we wouldn't have had hope. And the acronym that I like to use for hope is holding on to positivity and possibilities every day.
Wow.
And I had to listen and really hone my listening skills to hear God's voice on what to do, because there weren't books out back then and things like that about what to do with autistic children if you didn't institutionalize them. And Jordan, actually, I'm going to share a little bit of his story with you because he had terrible night terrors and he would scream all night long. And as part of that listening, the Lord told me to play cassette tapes, again, dating me, of scripture for Jordan. And we just played them very softly under his bed at night, and it calmed all of the night terrors, which just reaffirmed to me the power of staying in God's word, and built my faith while Jordan's faith was being built. Now Jordan, fast forward to 32 years old, he is the most amazing man of God, and he is a Bible savant where he knows absolutely everything in the Bible. And so it's challenging to be his parent at times, but it really magnified the importance of me having to listen to God. And so as we were, living life, I got very, very sick when I turned 30. And they thought I was going to lose my life. They actually had my parents drive me into the hospital to pass away because I didn't want the kids to go or see the ambulance come and be frightened as they were growing up. And the Lord spared my life because my dad prayed for me that night, all night long. And they said it was a miracle that I was still alive in the morning. It was a long recovery, but in that process, we sold everything we had to pay for our medical bills and to keep me alive. I was living on nutritional IVs and things like that because I couldn't absorb my nutrients from my food. And I really sought the Lord on what I was supposed to do. And I read the book, Woman, Thou Art Loosed. And there was just something that was really inspiring to me when I finished that book. And I had a vision from God that night that I was on a stage speaking with Jordan. My mom actually walked Jordan out to me on the stage. There's a big gold globe behind me, and I'm speaking to a stadium of faces that I could just see like blurred faces. And I was so surprised. And so I called my mom to tell her about this, and she was given the exact same vision. And I didn't know what it meant. And so I just thought, okay, God, like whatever, like I'm putting that on the shelf. If you want anything of that to happen, okay, great. Well, I started to recover, and I ended up finding a direct sales business, not on purpose. It was just to kind of get things at a discount to replace some of the things that we had sold to keep me alive. And I became very successful. And the very first award I received was the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. John Maxwell's book.
Mm.
And I didn't know who John was. There was no Google back then, so I couldn't even figure out where he lived. But as I was reading through, the Lord spoke to my heart and said I'd work with John Maxwell someday. And that was part of the globe that I saw. And when he had spared my life. And I didn't know what that meant. Again, I put it up on the shelf, said, God, if that's something you want to make happen, make it happen. And I became like the number one person in my state, went to the very top of my company. I worked corporately for direct sales companies for like being like their vice president of sales. And I just always had that expectancy in my heart that God was going to bring this to fruition someday. While I was working corporately, my mom came down with breast cancer, and I was her caregiver in Tennessee, and also trying to parent in Texas and be a wife and work my sales job. And one day, as I was taking her home from chemo, I was broadsided, and just wasn't able to keep up with that travel anymore. And I knew at that point I was supposed to start a coaching and speaking business and start taking what God had put inside of me and the leadership he had taught me my whole life into sharing it with other people. Mm-hmm. And when I did that, shortly after that, my mom passed away and was praying about, how do I take my business to the next level, or what do you want me to do? And I was finishing up Bible college at the time. And I got a phone call, and the person on the other end, who is now one of my very best friends, and we found out that we actually grew up about 3 miles from each other. She said, John Maxwell's thinking about starting a coaching and training business, and we wondered if you'd consider being a founding partner. Mm. And so all of a sudden, I remembered that book and the globe and all of these things all coming together. Still not understanding how it would play out, but just wanting to be faithful to what God had said. And so I said yes. And they didn't know what it was going to cost. They didn't know what we would get. But I knew that this was what God had meant in that vision and when he spoke to my heart. Mm. And, so I became a founding partner. I advanced my coaching and speaking business. And I just kept saying yes to opportunities and staying close to the fire, because this is the strongest community of like-minded people to my values that I could align with. And now I serve on faculty as well as have my own leadership consulting business. And as a result, too, I had one of our pastors call me one day with a word of knowledge and said, you're going to be a television host for TBN. And this is really a funny thing, because at that time we didn't even have television. And so I'm like, oh, what is TBN? I don't even know what this is, which is Trinity Broadcast Network, which is a Christian television station. It's the largest in the world. Yep. And I was in San Antonio, just living my life, doing my Maxwell business and leadership development and, writing my programs and just really feeling very purposeful. I had a friend ask me if I would do a 20-minute talk, and only about 10 people showed up to this talk. And so I was kind of disappointed that, I didn't have a larger audience and, things like that. But I was faithful, and I thought, I'm just going to do my very best job for these 10 people, and, hopefully I'll bless them. Well, inside of the audience was a station manager for TBN. And they offered me a position to host 2 television programs and do a lot of production work right there in San Antonio, doing that, and led me to working more closely on a global level with transformation through Maxwell and through some of the other things I was doing through TBN. So faith has always been very integral, and really listening to what God has for me and saying yes. And I'm so humbled by this, but John put together a culture award through the Maxwell team. And I was the first person to receive the Allow Room for Faith award. So it's important to me.
Yes. And, I'm so impressed. And you didn't get on this podcast to impress anybody, but I'm so impressed with your soul, with who you are. And the thing that comes to mind, and I knew this before, but I'm really glad everybody else gets to hear this, the word faithful, just being all in. So it sounds like you grew up in a a house of faith. It sounds like your parents were believers. Your mom was a believer, correct?
Yeah, my mom was the most amazing Christian person that I have ever met. She was the kind of person where people would walk up to her in the grocery store and offload like their life troubles onto her. And she'd be like, oh, well, let's pray about that. Or she would offer encouragement to them. And I see so much of her lived out in Jordan. But yeah, she was a great, amazing woman of faith. My dad had struggles here and there. He's now a very, very strong person of faith. But yeah, and we grew up, I would say, as a Christian family for sure.
Mhm. And what's so fascinating about your journey, 2 weeks ago, I interviewed Dory Matkowski,
Yes.
and Dory's from Michigan. Are you
Yeah.
from Michigan initially?
Yes. I'm originally from Michigan.
And so I'm from Toledo.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah. You did a
so
lot
I
in
can
Toledo.
wave,
Yeah.
I can wave at you across the border. So, but Dory talked about right away at 9 years old, she knew she was going to be own a dance studio.
Mhm.
Right? And as I hear you, I'm like, really? I mean, you powerful women that know exactly at a young age, you were a leader and doing things for other people, and other people were following you. You had you didn't have to, you questioned your faith for a little bit, but who doesn't? You had a walk of faith, even though I'm sure that not everybody believed the same thing you believed, but for the most part, you never wavered.
Yeah.
And the impact you had at a young age with young people that were looking at you and following you, it just blows my mind. So, who I know of you today is a direct result of all that you told us about, that happened when you were a young age. And I'm blown away by that. I think it happens more with women than with men. I think we wander aimlessly, at least I did, right? And eventually God said, okay, here we go. You want to play or not? And I eventually said yes. But to hear your faithfulness step by step and listening to him. So, for those who are listening, and again, this is an organic podcast. We don't know where it's going to go. We believe in faith and we believe it's led. So, for those that are listening, how did you stay in faith through all of that? Obviously, you were deep in your faith, but
Mhm.
you had some huge challenges.
Yeah.
And the way you said them, it wasn't matter of fact. It was, you could tell the intensity of them. But the way you said it was so based in faith. How did you stay in there? How do you hang in there? How did you not doubt? How did you make sure that you were listening to what God was telling you through all this?
Yeah. So I'm going to be transparent. I did doubt many times through several of these really major life things. Um, but I always knew that because God loved me so much, that he would send his son to die, and his son would willingly give his whole life for me, that I had to stay close to the word and stay in prayer. And so I just developed a real close dialogue with God of, just dialoguing with him as my best friend all of the time.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
and I think that when those moments of doubt would kind of sneak in, I could always tell I was a little bit further away from either reading my Bible or from that prayer life, that constant dialogue, not like these big formal prayers, but like really just having dialogue with God, like almost constantly, when it says in the word about, you know, pray without ceasing. That's kind of how I view it. Is it's just like checking in with God all the time and asking, like, is this what you want me to do? Is this how you want me to do it? And when I don't hear specifically from him, to pause, go
mm,
back into my journal and look back and say, okay, what was the last thing that he told me that I needed to do?
mm,
And make sure I just stand on that until he leads in the next direction. And it took me a while to get to the place where I would say yes without arguing. That was a big growth journey for me, because I'd be like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. You're like, I've never done this. And I can even remember, especially when I first started my coaching and consulting business, was, I'm like, God, like, could I just one time do the same thing twice? Like I'm always walking on the water. Like I don't know what I'm doing. And he'd be like, do you trust me? Take the step. And I'm like, okay. But there was a lot of back and forth dialogue with God, but he's so gracious to us and loves us so much that I think he wishes we wouldn't have that back and forth with him, but he's patient enough to continue to work in us until we can get to that place. And now, I don't know if it's just my age or just experience, but I know that when he says to go, to go. And right now I'm in this crazy season where he keeps bringing me to like this Matthew 11 type of situation where he's telling me to live in this space of unforced rhythms of grace. And I'm a striver, I'm a driver, I'm a take action person. You know, it's really hard for me not to move ahead. But I know that because he's kept me in this season for about 3 months now, that it's going to be the most amazing thing that he's going to deliver. And I believe, honestly, I felt like I've lived very much on purpose my life. But I think this next season is going to be the most purposeful for me.
Ooh, that's so powerful. Do you ever sit here and think, okay, God, here's what I think you're going to tell me and get ahead of it?
Yeah,
That's kind of what I do. Sometimes I think,
that's
oh,
yeah, the story of
I'm a
my
goal
life.
setter. Yeah, I have a list of goals. And I said, God, I
Mhm.
hope you're with me on this thing. And yeah,
Yeah,
come on, Becky. For me, I wanted to be Tony Robbins. I've said this. If anybody listens to this podcast, they're probably sick of me saying this. I did. I wanted to be Tony Robbins. Dude,
yeah,
one day I'm in my backyard, my special place where I hang out with him. And God said, I want you to write the book. And you and I had a discussion about this before I got on. Man, talk about a labor of love. Now that it's
yeah,
done and the book is done, I'm excited to teach others how to write a book. But
yeah,
man, you better not be attached to outcomes, right? You
yeah.
attached to the process, attached to faith, attached to listening. But he said, I want you to write the book. And the book was like a tell all, just like it was on my time on stage at Maxwell. It's like, I don't want to tell everybody this, but
Right.
you know this, Becky. You get it. You're solid in your faith. When he says that, it's a little different than I wonder if I'm supposed to do that. Right? It's like,
Exactly.
okay. And I tried in 2015. I met a guy that was going to collaborate with me on the book, and we wrote the book in 2020. So if you know me at all, I can put things off, but I never give up, right? And when he kept bugging me, he kept bugging me, he kept bugging me, and eventually I did it, and eventually that. But how do you, in your story, how do you know that? Ooh, how do you know to step back and let God be God, or that I'm supposed to pick up my mat and walk? Where does it happen? The differentiation, if you will, between one or the other. Again, I'm asking a super achiever, how do you know? Do you just do it and hit a wall and turn and say, whoop, I guess I wasn't supposed to go that way? Tell us about that.
I have had that. My jacket is the color of my forehead many a times because I would be so bruised from hitting those walls. And
Mm,
I I can say honestly, I did. Now God's really worked a work inside of my heart that I really wait on him. I've got to have a couple of scripture confirmations. I've got to
mm,
know that I know that I know that I'm supposed to move forward.
mm.
Because I guess too, like right now, I do want to have that most impactful season of my life. And
Yes.
so I know that I can't have any self inside of it. And
Mm,
so I know that God tells us that he works all things together for good for those that love him and have been called according to his purpose. So I know that even when I've made some of those mistakes of putting the cart before the horse and I've moved ahead where I thought it could be God, or I liked the idea and I didn't check it out with him first, um, that I know he works it for good, but I want in this season to make sure that I'm not. So I really give it a lot of prayer time. I give it, I want to see it in the word very plainly, and that he confirms it within me. A lot of times I'll hear like that saying, like this unforced rhythm of grace thing that he's got me in right now. Like I hear it everywhere around me. I don't know if it's because, it's activated my reticular system or whatever, but I know that for me, I've got to make sure, check in with him, don't run ahead into it. like I had mentioned, and just making sure that I have that peace inside of my soul that goes beyond understanding. And it tells us in the word too that we will prosper as our soul prospers. So when I stay at peace, things go a lot better. And so when
Mm,
I have that peace that goes beyond understanding that only God can give, then I know I'm supposed to be going in that direction
mm.
versus, like you said, like, yeah, like sometimes I hit the wall, or all of a sudden I'll like take off, and yeah, I'm sure that God said to do this. But then, yeah, door after door after door starts closing. And then I realized, oh no, this was for a teaching lesson. This was to develop something inside of me. And I fulfilled what he wanted me to, even though we didn't get to the end result I thought we were going to get to.
Yeah. I hope you're hearing this. Not you, Becky, everybody else. Because here's what's going on. A woman deep in faith, a super achiever who is died to self and let God walk every path of the journey, who has raised a son who had struggles to start, but today he's a Bible scholar, and Becky learns from him as well. Isn't that interesting? And I find it so fascinating that my knees are really sore, right? And what I mean
Yeah.
by that is when I first got sober, I learned there's two prayers in the 12 steps. The prayer, one of them is, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may
Yeah.
better do thy will. Take away my
Yeah.
difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power and thy love and thy way of life. And I say it obviously every day, but that's what kept me sober. And
Yeah.
that was being on my knees and doing that prayer every day. I knew nothing else. I didn't even know Jesus then. I didn't find Jesus found me 10 years later. He always knew I was there, but he finally woke me up 10 years later. But what I find fascinating about that is sometimes there's people watching this that don't believe. They think, oh,
Yeah.
you're talking that religious stuff. Well, Becky and I know that this is not religious stuff. This is about this incredible relationship with somebody who loved us so much. Think about it.
Yeah.
If your spouse was in a place where she was going to be harmed, would you get in front of that person? Would you do everything you could to protect them? I mean, we all say yes, but would we? I remember
Hmm.
hearing a story once about a guy who was a real, you've heard this story. He was a train engineer, and he operated the bridge, and he brought his son to work. Remember that? He brought his son to work with him one day, and his son was walking around the bridge, and all of a sudden another a train was coming, and he had to he had to close the bridge to let the train through, but his son was in the way, and he had to decide, am I going to sacrifice my son for all the people on the train? Now, I know what I would do, but I'm not going to say that publicly. But the reality is, he had to make a decision. That's what God did for us. I mean,
Yeah.
that's so big. But here's the problem: most people don't believe it. And I'm
Yeah.
just telling you what Mary's so good at this. She's in the Word every morning. I don't even work out in the morning until I've had time to hang out with God. It's my absolute first priority. And I know if I don't do that, I'm not set up for the day. I'm not
Yeah.
solid for the day. It's got to be every day, every time. Back to something you said, and then I have a question for you. Oswald Chambers said, he was a theologian, right? And
Hmm.
he said that if here's how he said it, if you're praying to God and you don't know what he wants for you,
Yeah.
you're not connected enough. And
Yeah.
to me, that's a wake up call. I translated it, but it's a wake up call. When I'm connected, I know, like you're talking about this incredible grace. It's from years of hanging out with him, years of knowing him, that talking to him out loud in the car, right? That it's from years of that. So this grace becomes so evident. You know he's taking you somewhere, and you know sooner or later he's going to show you. But you've got this trust and this grace, and
Yeah.
I'm so fascinated by it. What if somebody's listening to this, tell us about your journey. How do you start your day? Of course, somebody's listening to this, so let me rephrase that. for those who are listening to this, what would you do to start your day to be so solid in your journey as a coach and a teacher and a wife and a mother? How do you start your day?
Yeah. I actually start my day the night before.
Mm,
And right before I go to bed, when I leave the office, I check my calendar and I pray over my calendar and ask the Lord to use the upcoming day to, whatever is going to maximize the kingdom and whatever He has planned for me, that I'd be a blessing to other people. Then I go about my evening things that I'm doing, right? And then right before bed, I look at the calendar again and I just say another quick prayer, like, Lord, I'm surrendering this all to you, and, work this out how it needs to work out. Now, again, I'm just going to be very transparent.
mm,
I'm just a very transparent person. The Lord has also taught me that, because I felt like I had to hide all my sins and my dimples and dents and blemishes for a long time and appear perfect. Now I just put it all out there. I don't
yeah,
do devotions first thing in the morning. I don't. I take my shower. I do breakfast, start laundry, like get my whole household up and going. Then I come into my office. That's when I engage. And that's my
mm,
quiet time. That's when I
yeah,
read my Bible. I've got a devotional that I'm going through right now based off of the Passion Translation. I'm just in love with that one right now. And
mm,
then I just start engaging, and I'm just super purposeful with a time blocked calendar. I'm very strategic in what I do. But then I also take out my lunch hour and spend it with my grandson on FaceTime. He's
mm,
6 months old, and he lives in San Antonio, so I don't get to see him. So we spend that time. I usually block off about a half hour afterwards to do some type of personal development reading or go back into like my Bible or something like that to get refocused again before I dive back in for the afternoon. And it seems like it grounds
mm.
me to do that. And currently, right now, I'm in two different small groups. One is Kingdom business leaders through our church. And
Ooh,
then I'm also, and it's just basic business principles on doing business God's way. And then I'm also
mm,
involved with a friend that is also a team member um, that is doing a prayer, like small group for entrepreneurs. So we're praying
mm.
over our business every single day and learning how to pray for our businesses. So I really do value personal development, but I can't say that I'm one of those people. I've always wanted to be one of those people that says I get up and the first thing I do this is get into the Bible or pray. I do pray like when I start in the shower and things like that, but I find that I am not at my best until I'm here to focus inside of my office.
Yeah,
And then that's
mm,
my space to really dive deep. And I'm very purposeful too, to, um, go like to the beach or go on our back porch, which is just like this little oasis, to spend time with God, really listening in absolute quiet without distraction, to do like a sabbatical, like every 3 to 4 months, just really checking in with God at a whole
mm.
different, deeper level. But as far
Yeah.
as a daily basis, that's what my routine looks like.
Yeah, so it's unique to you, and it's what works for you. And what I hear is it's consistent.
Mhm.
You do it a lot, and even though you're not in that place, you're always talking to God, and I
Absolutely.
get that. So talk to us about your. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just said absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about your coaching right now and the essence of your coaching and where you find it's having the biggest mark and who your clients are that you're just really connecting with. Kind of give us a deep dive on your coaching path currently.
Yeah. So right now I'm working with a multi-generational team and working with building and developing their leadership. So that's been just great. We've been able to do some deep coaching, training, some things like that. A lot with human behavior, um, helping develop talent and leadership. I love to do that because I love to see optimized results through relationships, valuing people, and high performance. Um, I do spend some time working with coaches through the Maxwell Leadership Certified team, helping them to like strategize, write proposals, do growth and business plans, discovering their niche and their, USP, and their speaking and coaching and things like that. But one of the things that I'm loving doing right now is inviting people into my home and doing VIP retreats with them. And so we go on our back porch, which I mentioned is this amazing oasis, and we spend time there, excuse me, or in our living room in front of the fireplace, and working with them on really building and developing their businesses or getting them unstuck. And God brought me to this really unique understanding of how to release trauma from cells. And that's really what is like the thing holding most people back. I started with the team going with like growth and leadership. And then I found the transformation tables and I realized, oh, that was like the missing piece beforehand. We've got to get values in place, right? But then what I discovered over the last year and a half is, and it's from my own journey, having to release some of the trauma from my cells from experiences growing up and my marriage and things like that, was that when I was able to release the cell, it freed up the soul realm in my body to release it from my physical body. So I'm not suffering from health issues. And then it also gave this unique creativity to my business. And so I walk people through that process if they want to do that, or we just look at whatever it is that you'd like to focus on for your business for a day, 2 days, 3 days, whatever works for you. With this one-on-one undivided attention. And, my back porch just, is kind of like in the woods. And so you'll see deer and all kinds of fun things by just sitting inside, and you don't have the mess of the bugs, but that's what I'm loving doing right now.
Isn't it interesting? Home is that place for us to bring people in and to share our environment and also help people grow within our home. Mary has done a fantastic job. For a year, we were bringing Celebrate Recovery leaders to our home, and they came every Sunday, and we would cook them dinner and have a leadership meeting. And after we opened Celebrate Recovery, we found that we didn't do it as much. We did it just once a month. But we're looking at our area, our home. We got rid of the pool table because we wanted more chairs around. And it was a spiritual thing, a spiritual lesson for Mary, that she said, I want this to be a community house. I want people to feel comfortable coming here. I want to bring people in here and do leadership retreats. And so I hear you. When she listens to this podcast, she'll say, that's my girl, because she's walking in that path exactly the same way. And what I'm really hearing that you're doing is what I heard, something that just triggered me. I hope I heard it right. Was in the one-on-ones and allowing people to tell their story is where so much growth comes from. When people hold something in, I heard somebody refer to it last week as a cough. When you cough it out, that's where the freedom comes and where the peace comes from. And I know that's true in recovery circles. It's true for my mastermind groups when they can talk it out in group. And then when we get together on one-on-ones, there's such growth that comes because they can be so authentic and real, right? And that's so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And one of the other things that I do is I hold the space for them. So like if they say, well, I've always had shoulder pain or whatever, we go back to what the emotional cause of that disease could be. And we just kind of talk and discover, and I hold the space for them. And if this is something that they desire freedom for, really taking them on this freedom journey. And it's quick. It's not like it takes, days and days or, any of this. It's very quick. And we're able to really surrender that to the Lord and get the freedom from all of this as well. And I think at that point is when that spark happens with that new creativity and that feeling of being more purposeful. But we definitely need to tell our stories. We have a story, and it's to help overcome, right? It tells us in Revelation that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony, and not loving our lives unto death. And I believe that last part actually just means that we're willing to share the ugly parts of our life that God's brought us through, so that you don't have to go through that. Or if you have gone through that, we have empathy and compassion, and we're going to love you through it to the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. You're an example, frankly, of someone who's changed and kept the change. You're always rock solid, but you had adversity, as we all have. And you
Yeah.
had to get on your knees. You questioned your faith at times, but it didn't last long. And what God used in that pain that he was putting you through is growth. You got closer to him in the moment eventually. And in that growth, it became who you are today, the woman you are today, the human you are today, the teacher you are today. You're an impact player. I mean, it is just so obvious. Let me ask you another question, a couple quick ones.
Okay.
Do you coach men and women and do you do one-on-one? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I do. I do a lot of coaching with men. Most of my executives that I coach are men, and my
Mhm.
leaders that way. Most of my entrepreneurs or solopreneurs are females, but I do quite a few men as well. But I would probably say of my solopreneurs, it's probably 2/3 women, 1/3 men. Where most of my executives are, it would probably be like 80% men and 20% women.
Impressive. What book are you reading right now, Becky, that you're diving into besides the Bible?
Oh my goodness. I just moved them off my desk because I was reading them actually when I was in the other room. I can't remember the titles. I'm so bad at this. Um,
We can keep,
I just read Fully Alive
okay.
by Sarah Larson. I'm going to be starting to read The Linchpin by, let me see, you've got it over here, by Russell Brunson. But I'm working on some things about trauma within my own life still. And
Uh-huh.
so I'm working on a couple of books on relationships, and I feel so bad that I can't remember the titles of them. I'm so sorry. And then
No,
that prayer book about praying for my business. So
right
I don't have
on.
the titles. Sorry.
No, you're good. That's perfect. So, Becky, how would someone get a hold of you? They want you to coach them either as an entrepreneur or a business leader, or they just want to reach out to an impactful woman that has had such an influence.
Yeah, so you can reach me. Probably best way is email Becky at leadersempowered.com. So it's plural leaders empowered.com. And then, I'm also on Facebook. You can private message me there, or through Instagram, you can private message me there. I'm not as active on LinkedIn with the messages there because I just find that too many come through that for me. But if you really want to reach out to me and connect with me personally, Becky at leadersempowered.com is probably your best place.
So, Becky, as you know, I've told you this before, I admire you so much. I appreciate your support on the journey that I've been on. I'll never forget, I was on stage and I mentioned my past and I mentioned my dollars that I was spending per month on my drug of choice back then. And I said it out loud and I heard somebody over in the right go, oh, remember that? I've had that discussion. And that's so funny. But I've always admired you so much. You know that. And I hope that we can have a further discussion because people need to hear more and more of your story. Thank you so much for taking the time and doing this and sharing your heart and your journey and your love of the Lord. So powerful.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Becky. Talk to you. Thanks everybody for joining us this week. If it was something that impacted you, which we know it did, let Becky know. She would love to hear from you. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe and give us some feedback. God bless everybody. Talk to you soon.